Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my channel. I really appreciate it. Please click to subscribe. The murders of the Kansas moms, one of the more disturbing cases that I've covered recently. I mean, just so barbaric. 30 stab wounds, cut wounds. There are new details coming out of court documents that I've been going over that show just how violent the murders were. Also new. Some of the suspects are turning on each other.
Is there anything you want to say to the victims, Tiffany?
We've got new details on the alleged mastermind, Grandma Tiffany, the group God's Misfits, and how that ties into the whole thing. I mean, it is a sordid, twisted tale from Kansas and the Oklahoma Panhandle. I'm getting into all of the new details in this edition of Brian Entin Investigates. So many moving parts on this case, and I actually have a breaking development, something that just came in. Grandma Tiffany, the alleged mastermind behind the murders, has now reportedly pled no contest to the charges, which means that she is likely in the process of accepting a plea deal, likely a deal, so that she can avoid the death penalty in the case.
Yeah, it's been heart-wrenching. Yep, it's heartbreaking what happened. And, this is a good area and good people, and we don't want to be known for this.
So one of the more disturbing cases that I've covered recently was the case of the missing Kansas moms. It's awful. Basically on March 30th, 2024, Veronica Butler, she's 27 years old, and Jilian Kelley, a 39-year-old woman, they disappeared from rural Texas after their car was found abandoned. This is in Kansas, like right near the Oklahoma border, near the Oklahoma Panhandle, Highway 95 and Road L, really just kind of in the middle of nowhere, south of a place called Elkhart, Kansas. And when I say rural, you've got to understand that even when we were out there investigating this story, I was out there with my producer, we were in different places. We had to communicate by dropping location pins. It was hard having cell phone service. I mean, it is the middle of nowhere. It was very, very hard to keep track of where you were if you weren't from that area. So it's very rural. The police quickly learned after arriving at the scene that there was an abandoned car, and they quickly figured out that Veronica Butler was in a nasty custody battle with Tifany Adams, her children's grandmother, and that's on the paternal side. She's become known as Grandma Tiffany. That's what a lot of people in the area call her. And Grandma Tiffany was the mother of Wrangler Rickman, the children's father, who was currently in rehab. Now, they were informed by Veronica's father that Grandma Tiffany had gained primary custody of her two grandchildren after allegations of abuse were made against Veronica Butler's brother. I know there's a lot of kind of complicated details here, but bear with me because this really sets up the story and what led up to these murders. Now, while the court granted primary custody to Tifany Adams, again, Grandma Tiffany, it also ordered that Veronica could have supervised visitation with her children every Saturday. Now, usually those visits were supervised by someone named Cheryl Brune at the suggestion of Tifany Adams, who'd asked the court to designate Cheryl Brune as the person who would supervise the visits. But that Saturday, Brune was unable to supervise the visitation, and Butler asked if Jilian Kelley, a different woman approved by the court for custody supervision, if she could accompany her to do the custody exchange. And it turns out that Butler told her family that she was going to pick up her children from a place called Four Corners. Again, it's in this really rural area, and it's basically like an old gas station, but it's known as Four Corners to the locals in that area, in the Oklahoma Panhandle, Kansas area. Butler and Kelley, they left Hugoton, Kansas. They traveled to Four Corners, and Oklahoma and Kansas, they're very close together in that area, and Four Corners is right there. And again, if you're local, you pretty much know where Four Corners is. Kelley arrived at that location at about 9:40 a.m. That's according to phone records that investigators now have. Butler planned to bring the children to a birthday party, but after they didn't arrive, the family began looking for Butler. Melissa and someone named Melissa and Joey Padilla. Yeah, Melissa and Joey Padilla. They were Butler's family members. They are the ones who located Butler's abandoned vehicle and immediately contacted law enforcement. That was at about 12:09 p.m. So police, they quickly became very concerned when they examined the vehicle and noticed evidence of a severe injury. Blood was found on the roadway. There was blood also on the edge of the roadway. I remember the blood because we drove near the car a few days after the police had been there, and you could see that it had been covered up by dirt. There was apparently, there was a lot of blood. Veronica's glasses were also found in the roadway south of the car. There was a pistol magazine that was found inside Kelley's purse, but no pistol was found. Grandma Tiffany informed the police that the children had stayed with family friends, a couple named, it's Barry, it's Barrett and Lacey Cook. And that was on March 29th, 2024, the night before the disappearance. Grandma Tiffany had planned to pick them up that morning for the custody exchange. Now here's where police became even more suspicious because Grandma Tiffany told authorities that she'd called Veronica at 9 a.m. to confirm the meeting, and Veronica had said that something had come up and she couldn't make it. However, shortly after that call, Butler left Hugoton, Kansas, where she lived, and drove toward Four Corners. And things got even more concerning when the police interviewed Cheryl Brune, that is the court-appointed supervisor, who said she was actually available to supervise the visit, but that Tiffany had told her to take a few weeks off so that Tiffany, again, Grandma Tiffany, could have the children talk to her about the other custody supervisors the court had appointed. So there was a real inconsistency there. Tifany Adams was the last known person to communicate with Butler and was scheduled to meet Butler and Kelley for the visitation. So the search for Veronica, Butler, and Jilian Kelley, it became really a massive story with everyone having some opinion about what might have happened, especially people in that area. And turns out it was much, much worse than I could have imagined. Again, I got there pretty early on, spent weeks investigating, and some of these new details that are coming out are more horrific than I could have imagined. Veronica, Butler, and Jilian Kelley, they'd been kidnapped from their car and then placed in a livestock trailer and then stabbed to death and buried in an old refrigerator on farmland close to Four Corners. I went out to the spot where they were buried.
Sources tell us the mom's bodies were discovered in a very, very remote area. It's down this dirt road, and it's about 8.5 miles from where the mom's car was found. And this is the property right here, that barn that you see in the distance. Our sources say the bodies were found near that barn under a dam. The owner of this land had leased the land to suspect Tad Cullum. It's dark out here, so bear with me, but this is the area where the missing women were found. This is the spot. You remember in the police report they mentioned a dam. This right here, this buildup of dirt, this is the dam. There's a pond on the other side, and if you walk with me this way, just about 50 feet or so, maybe a little more from the dam, you can see where the earth is disturbed, where the tractors were out here. This is where investigators came. They dug right in this area, went down about 10 feet, I'm told, and this is where they discovered the missing mom's bodies. If you look in the distance there, you can see there is a pile of hay back there. I am told by sources that hay was moved over the area where the digging happened, that Tad, the suspect Tad, moved that hay over here to cover up the area where he was digging, hoping that the cows, this is there's a cow farm here, that the cows would come over, this is a ranch, and start feeding on the hay and make the area look less suspicious. But still, investigators were led to this spot, and again, this is the area right here where they started digging and they found the bodies.
On April 14th, 2024, only 2 weeks after Veronica and Jilian's abandoned car was found, there were 4 people who were arrested and charged in connection with the women's murders. Tad Cullum, Tifany Adams, again, Grandma Tiffany, Cora Twombly, and Cora Twombly. And a week and a half later, on April 24th, 2024, a 5th person was arrested, and that person was Paul Grice. And according to authorities, all 5 suspects belonged to an anti-government group called God's Misfits. And God's Misfits regularly met at the Twomblys' home and other locations like an old school. The group had allegedly tried to kill Butler before it came out. That was according to a teenage witness who happens to be Cora Twombly's daughter. She spoke to investigators claiming that they were responsible for the murder. She was a big part of this investigation. You're going to find out as we continue to sort of peel back the layers. I went out to the old school where the Gods Misfits meetings were. Again, basically just in the middle of nowhere. Take a look at this.
We have been driving up and down these dirt roads literally for 2.5 hours. There's nothing here. So this behind me right there, that's the Twombly's house, just out here really in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by farmland. But what's interesting is right next to the Twombly's house is this old school called the Plainview School. Told that it closed a couple of decades ago. But what's interesting is we've heard from people in town that this is where the Gods Misfits meetings were held at times, which is a little confusing to the neighbors because it would be difficult to get into the school because it's all locked. But they also did tell me that there were times they would come by and they would see 12 or 15 cars out here, and it looked like there was some kind of meeting. And another interesting thing, you can see it's all overgrown. I mean, it's been abandoned for quite some time. But what's also interesting is you see this door of this on the school is all boarded up. One neighbor told me that when police came to investigate the murders and arrested the Twomblys, they actually kicked in the window there of the school to go inside as part of the investigation. What they found, we don't know. It's kind of eerie if you look inside the school through the window. I mean, it's all just relatively untouched from decades ago. You can even see there's like trophies in a case down there. So whether or not the meetings actually happened here, we can't say for sure. But again, people in town say they believe this is where the Gods Misfits meetings were. And neighbors say they definitely saw gatherings of cars out here and believe this may also have been where the meetings were, either inside the school, maybe behind the school. And again, the Twomblys lived in the house right over there. So can you explain, I mean, since you're from here, in terms of the anti-government, like what that means?
Well, they don't. I know some people that are kind of anti-government. The joke around here is we like big boobs and small government. We don't want the government interfering with us. The government is overreach on everything they do nowadays. I even agree with that a little bit.
But how do you think that this group may have played into, because they mentioned it very specifically in the affidavit, that they were all in the group, all the stuff. How do you think it may have played into it?
My opinion, that's where the other people got involved. I think there was basically a smaller situation that because of that group, it grew into more people. My opinion.
You think that's how the others besides
Yes.
Tad and Tiffany got involved?
If I needed some help doing something, I'd go grab a couple of my friends. You know, if I needed help moving a car, anything like this, I'd go grab a couple of my friends. We're a very tight, close community. I don't think that's any different when you have groups like that. They went and got help. Yeah, that's what I think.
Well, you got to realize that by the time the court proceedings started in this case, there were 5 defendants and they were all brought to the courthouse together. They were jammed. This is bizarre being there because they were jammed into a space to maybe hold like 2 defendants at most, but they were all there together. And security was insanely tight. I was there for some of these hearings. The 5 defendants, they were placed in seats all around the courtroom, with many of the defense lawyers left to sit in the area where the jury usually sits because it was so packed. Things started to clear out right away when it became clear from the judge that Cora Twombly had agreed to testify against the other defendants. I was outside when some of the suspects walked in. Again, it was just quite a show. It's a small town, small courthouse, and I was able to shout some questions.
Is there anything you want to say to the victims, Tiffany? Paul, is there anything you want to say to the victims' families?
Sorry for their loss.
Anything you want to say to your family?
I miss them. I love them.
Tad, is it true you're still conducting business from jail?
So there was pretrial hearings for Tad Cullum and Cora Twombly, with the star witness for the prosecution being Cora Twombly. And this is all kind of just incestuous here. And Cora Twombly is, of course, Cole's wife. And Grandma Tiffany waived her right to a preliminary hearing. She was escorted out of the courtroom and back to the jail. And as a result of her absence, the entire configuration of defendants had to be redone. They took out Grandma Tiffany's counsel table and her chair to leave space for the two remaining defendants, Cora Twombly and Tad Cullum. So Cora Twombly told a tale of the murder that had her really as a clear conspirator, but as one who didn't really do the actual killing. She started her testimony admitting that the first plan to kill Veronica by her Kansas home failed. The first plan failed, and it didn't involve Cora Twombly. Cora Twombly testified that her daughter knew about the failed attempt at trying to kill Veronica Butler on February 29, 2023. And when that plan failed, Cora testified that Tifany Adams came up with a new plan. So basically, on Saturday, when Veronica came to get the kids and leave a horse trailer and kill her, Cora's job was to sit and to wait for Veronica on the road and then come and pick up the cell phones after the murder and then go and get Tifany and drive her home. And Tifany said that the murder was going to take 4 people, Cora, Tifany, Tad, and then also Paul Grice. Cora had no knowledge of when Paul Grice was recruited to take place in the murders, and we'd find out later when Grice took the stand to testify against all of the defendants. He was not actually present there when Cora was testifying. There were meetings on Sundays to discuss the little details about the phones, whose trailer they were going to use, what person would do specifically what. Cora was asked to provide vehicles old enough so that they didn't have GPS, so there was some planning there. She was to follow Veronica from Elkhart, tell Tifany she was on her way. She was then to drive ahead close to Four Corners, again, that old gas station, and wait for Veronica's car to go by on the road and to let Tifany know that she was coming. She was then to get the cell phones after the murder, and she was told to put them into a box. Now, Tifany's job was to lure the 2 women into the trailer by telling them the kids were inside with a new baby calf. And then Tad and Paul Grice would kill Veronica in the trailer. Then they were going to take her to a hole they dug up and bury them. She knew where the burial site was and had been there once before. They were going to bury Veronica in a freezer, is what was said in court. And they didn't want any animals to dig it up. And they were going to put cows in the pasture, they said, to put hay there, that the cows would stomp on it and would keep anyone from finding it. That's what came out at court. She carefully and clearly, really without any emotion, outlined the plan to kill Veronica Butler and whoever came with her, while stating that she had no part in the actual killings. That major fact, along with her cooperation, will likely play a major role in determining her sentence. But apparently she is now cooperating, at least as of the last hearing that we were at. Now, along with specific testimony about the murders, including details about how Veronica Butler escaped from the trailer only to be tackled by Paul Grice and stabbed to death on an Oklahoma roadside. Again, just barbaric, before being put into a freezer and buried deep underground. There was another really startling revelation in Cora's testimony. It was that she only learned Jilian Kelley would be with Veronica the night before the murders. She did know, however, that someone would be with her. Cora's testimony was that she wasn't on board with killing Jilian. And it, at least to me, seemed kind of disingenuous, though, when she was talking about saying that she wasn't on board. So when Cora inquired about killing the supervisor, Tifany allegedly responded if it was one of Veronica's supervisors, she'd done nothing to help keep the kids safe. She was collateral damage, and she would have to die too. And then the prosecutor asked, did you have a problem with it? And Cora responded, we all had a problem with it, but it was the plan. And then the prosecutor asked, at this point, did your daughter know about the plan? And Cora responded, she knew Veronica Butler was supposed to die the next day. I told her that I wouldn't be there the next day. I had things to pick up. And then Cora said, after we saw the site, Tad was very apprehensive about the plan, all the things that could go wrong. He knew that him and Tifany would be the first suspects and was worried something wasn't covered. And then Cora testified that Cora Twombly was added to the conspiracy just 1 week before the murders. Just 1 week before, the Gang of Four realized they needed a 5th man to watch for police who were driving south towards the crime scene. She said she asked Cole if he'd watch the other end of the road, and Cole's original job was to watch for law enforcement and to take the trailer to Four Corners. And so Cora's testimony continued. She said, I was to follow her down from Elkhart and then to pull over and wait for her. It's Veronica. Wait for Veronica's car to go by, let Tifany know she was coming. And then after it happened, pick up the cell phones and put them in a box. The plan called for 4 people, Cora, Tifany, Tad, and Paul Grice. The 5th man actually turned out to be Cole. He was added again just a week before the murders. I know it gets a little confusing, but they added him just a week before the murders, apparently. So Cole's tasks, according to the testimony, were to provide the vehicles and the trailer. They needed vehicles old enough not to have a GPS, and he got the trailer from someone named Clint Twombly, apparently, who's Cole's cousin. Tifany's job, Cora said, was to get them the trailer, lure them into the trailer under the guise that the kids were in there. Then they were going to kill Veronica. Paul and Tad were supposed to kill Veronica Butler. Then they were going to take them to a hole they dug up and bury them in the freezer again, and they didn't want anyone to dig it up. Again, they were going to put cows in the pasture to stomp on it, to keep anyone from finding it. She testified about that. Tad's task, and again, this is all new from this hearing, Tad's task was to drive the livestock trailer to the burial site. And investigators say Tifany also brought the stun devices, so like stun guns for everyone, and she also brought the burner phones. So Cora said that she could see the car and also the trailer, and I saw 2 people run from the trailer, she said, towards the car. I thought that things hadn't gone as they were planned, she said. They were supposed to be in the trailer. I drove across the highway and pulled up behind Veronica's car, and then said she saw Paul Grice struggling on the ground, didn't see anyone else. She said she got out, she went towards Paul, that he was struggling with Veronica and yelling, I need some help, I need some help. And Tifany handed her Veronica's cell phone, handed the taser, and she says, I told her to go get help from Paul. Sorry, some of these notes, so there's no cameras allowed in the courtroom, so these are notes that we took that I'm just kind of going back through. That's why, I was trying to write really, really fast, and so was the producer. I was with Allison, so some of this might be a little confusing, but these were literally like our notes from in court. So at this time, they were on the ground. She says, I saw Paul Grice on top of Veronica on the ground and saw his arms going up and down. I believed he was stabbing her. She said she could not see the knife at this time. She said that I had a metal ammo can and I was supposed to wrap it in tinfoil and put it in an ammo box. She got in Veronica's car, got the other cell phone from the console, it was apparently on the passenger side of the door, took the cell phone to put them in the back of the flatbed on passenger side, and got out a cinder block and then destroyed them. So this was quite a plan. She then walked back to the trailer. She said, I see the freezer and Tad and Paul. They were loading Veronica into the trailer between the freezer and the side of the trailer. Tad was trying to lift her body into the trailer. She said she didn't see Jilian and Kelley at this point. She said there were 2 yellow straps on the freezer, and that they never discussed the straps before. She said turned around and went and got a shovel off the back of the flatbed because there was blood on the ground and Tifany wanted it covered up. She said she was upset that there was a lot of blood on the ground and that she tried to throw dirt on it. So again, this is a lot of detail, but I figure people who have been following this case, some of this is details that people haven't heard before. So Paul said that he cut his finger and was asking for tape. She said, I got a roll of duct tape from the truck, handed it to Paul, and threw like a slat in the trailer, finished putting dirt on the blood, and Tifany reached into Veronica's car and turned it off because it was still running. She said she put the shovel back, and they got back in the car and then drove back to her home. So at this point during the hearing, the prosecution asked what was the conversation in the car with Tifany, and Cora said that things hadn't gone as she'd planned. There's a lot of blood. She asked if I could go down to where Tad and Cole were headed to keep them calm. She said she didn't want to go to the burial site, but she had changed clothes, put all the clothes in a bag, stacked them under the floorboard of the truck in the case. She'd missed something, left the house, met Cole. He was in Clint, her son's flatbed. There were things in the back of Clint's truck, a bag of floor dry, claw hammer. She said something like that. She said Cole and I took the 2 burner phones, the hammer, and the floor dry and dropped it down an incinerator. She said they did that at Frank Twombly's place. So then Paul Grice testified at the preliminary hearing. So this is the next part. He said that he knew Cora Twombly since he was a little kid. He and his wife got acquainted with her in 2023 when they moved to the area, that they started as friends, and then they would go on Sundays to Cole's house with another couple, Barrett and Lacey Cook, and Tad and Tiffany, and started going to these God's Misfits meetings. And Cole said that none of them fit in anywhere, so they were God's misfits. That's basically how he described it. So he said that they held seminars, and Cora, Paul, and his wife, and that they would all go to basically these meetings. And you saw earlier, I showed that gas station, apparently. Not gas station, the old school. The meetings were also there, apparently. They discussed the process of being what they called sovereign citizens. They wanted to become state nationalists, they said. So they couldn't find a church. And Josh, Cole's brother, said, let's worship and eat on Wednesdays and Sundays. And that's apparently how this group started. Grice testified that he learned from Tad and Tifany Adams that her grandkids were being abused. And Tiffany said she had a video admission of the boy who did it. She said he sodomized and raped one of Tiffany's grandchildren. And Grice, though, said that he never actually saw the video. Tad also told him that he and Tiffany had a 26-page document that they kept in a safe at Tad's mother's house about the sexual abuse, and Grice never saw the document or asked about it. So apparently never saw the video, never saw the document. Grice testified, Tiffany told us that the girls are not in a safe environment, and once she got us hooked on what was going on, he said she'd bring up the sexual abuse all the time. She'd brought it up all the time, he said. But he said that Tad didn't bring it up. And this is what he said. In early February 2023, she texted me, and then in early March, she asked to come to my house and talk about it. The first meeting, he said, apparently was 2 hours. And she said several things happened with Wrangler's girls. And remember, her son is Wrangler. I know there's a lot of names here. So her son is Wrangler. The first was a drug environment with Wrangler. The other issue was painting a bad picture of the mothering ability of Veronica and other parental abilities of both. And then, of course, the sexual abuse she brought up. Grice claimed that after the talk at the first meeting, she'd point blank asked him if he'd kill Veronica. And he said, I let her story create a lot of bitterness in me and I didn't have any proof. And then he said it was my fault. She used a Bible verse from Matthew and stumbling blocks from Luke. It was deceiving. He said that he fell for it. And he said, she knew I had a bad upbringing with an abusive dad. She knew I had enough hate in my heart to get it done. She told the group that I'd killed people before because I told her that I was part of a mercenary group that had killed people. But then he said that that was a lie, that he had never actually done that. So at the second meeting in March, there was a second meeting. She said Veronica would be getting full custody and she didn't have the money to fight it in court anymore. And that is when he said he agreed to help and kill her. So he admitted that. He said that. She said that Tad and Cora had agreed to help. She asked for my input, he said, and I told her that I have no idea how to do it. I said I'd help kill Veronica, but didn't want to do anything to anybody else. And that is when she said stuff about the supervisor. She said it's a nobody, and that the supervisor, something about the supervisor being a witness, but he said my job was to kill Veronica. The murder was supposed to take place at the corner of Road L and Highway 95, and that Tad was supposed to kill Jilian. And this is where it gets pretty brutal. He said, the use of hammers was my idea. Knock him in the head and knock him out, he said. I didn't learn that Cole would be involved until the night before. Cole would be at Four Corners as a lookout. That was apparently his job. Cole and Cora came to Paul's house that morning at 8:15 a.m. Cora left to go to Elkhart from my house. I got in that trailer, he said. I was losing my mind mostly. I was scared. I could see through the slats. Tiffany told them that Cole and Kendall were in the trailer with a baby calf, and they wanted her to see. I saw Tifany walk towards the vehicle, he said, and Tad hanging outside on the passenger side. Tifany walked past the door, he said, and then he said that Veronica was behind her. And then I think he said Veronica basically leaned in the side door of the trailer, and that is when he says I attacked her. First, shocked her with the taser, hit her with the hammer a couple of times. She moved and came out of the trailer. He said he hit her again, and then he apparently hit her so hard, he said, that the hammer broke. And he was actually starting to cry at this point during the testimony. It gets really intense. He said, I tried to shock her with the taser, and I hit myself and my right arm. He said my right arm went numb. The hammer broke after the first. I hit her outside. I hit her twice inside the trailer. She got away, and I tackled her in front of her car. Just imagine how terrible this was for these women. Both of them were screaming. He said they were screaming bloody murder. I heard a faint scream and then a gasp from Jilian. And Grice was like dabbing his eyes at this point. He said, I pulled my knife and I didn't know what to do, trying to get to her throat, he said. At some point, he said he cut his hand open, couldn't feel it, was yelling at Cora, trying to get help out of pure, like he said, just scaredness and pain. And then at this point, Paul started weeping, and he was literally having trouble like speaking at this point, I think, because it was getting emotional. He said, I saw Jilian in the trailer, don't know who loaded it. And then he said Tifany was walking in a circle around us. And Tifany is allegedly sort of the mastermind, and so apparently just walking around in a circle around this, and was laughing, he said. And at this point, during the testimony in this small courtroom, Veronica's father like literally yelled out because it was so emotional.
Word close. Emotional is not the word.
Emotional. It's so much anger, so much frustration. Like, how can you hate somebody so much that you want to kill them? How can you hate the mother of your grandchildren so much that you want to end her life? That was not fair to her. That's not fair to our family.
It's not fair to Jilian's family either.
My brother lost a daughter.
None of that. She didn't deserve any of it. Neither one of them did.
And so the judge started to try to calm things down. Basically was saying this is an American courtroom. These defendants are entitled to due process. And if you don't think you can control your emotions, basically you're welcome to step outside because of this little yelling incident. Then the testimony continued. He said, I looked at Veronica. She quit breathing. She quit blinking. You could see that the light was gone. I stood up and then fell to the ground, sat there for a bit, and was like a few feet away from her. He said, Tad came walking over from the trailer. She was lying on her left side, head towards the passenger side of the car. And then Tad apparently lifted her head, lifted her legs, and just sat back in the trailer. Just terrible. He said there was blood everywhere, that someone shut the door on me. Next thing I knew, we were leaving, started noticing that Jilian's eyes were fluttering. Apparently, Jilian wasn't dead. Said, try checking her for pulse, touched her throat to find out if she was alive or dead. It was so chaotic, he said, all of his nerves, they were bouncing all over the road, couldn't tell if she was breathing or not. And then he said he started getting feelings that he was set up. Felt like the only one with blood on his hands was him. Started thinking of putting bodies in the freezer and how scared she'd be if she woke up in the freezer because he didn't know if Jilian was actually dead. It's just terrible to think about. And he says that's when he decided to stab her 2 to 3 more times in the neck and then dragged her to the freezer. But he says he never did try to lift her in. So he says, I told all 3 of them the same story, that Jilian had woken up and she attacked me, trying to kill me. I wanted to see their response, if they didn't want me to kill her or not. So at that point, then he started lying to them, and it got really intense during that hearing.
I'm joined now by Allison Weiner. She's the producer that I've been working with a ton on this story out in Kansas and Oklahoma. We've spent a lot of time out there, a lot of sort of wild and crazy adventures out there because it, as I was saying, it's, in the middle of nowhere and there's a lot of characters and the town has sort of been on edge about this whole thing. In the beginning, it was hard for us to get people to talk, but then people started coming out. But I wanted to ask you, Allison, because it's a little bit confusing. Where do things stand now with all of the defendants, and kind of remind us like who's pled and who's against who, and sort of what's the situation now?
Okay, we have five defendants. The first four were arrested about 2 weeks after the murder, and they included Tifany Adams, her boyfriend Tad Cullum, Cora Twombly, and her husband Cole Twombly. And then about a week and a half later, Paul Grice was arrested, who is not related to any of these guys, but they all went to a same kind of church service together. So those five are all arrested. They have all been in court. And then we had what is known as a preliminary hearing in the case. And at that preliminary hearing, Tifany Adams waived her right to a preliminary hearing. So she left and they took her out of the proceedings and all the way back to jail. Then Cole Twombly decided he was staying. He's still pleading not, he hasn't entered a formal plea and he will do that on November 5th. But Cole Twombly, Tad Cullum, and Tifany Adams have not entered a formal plea. They will have a formal arraignment on November 5th, 2025. Cora Twombly, the wife of Cole, has decided that she is going to testify for the government. She's cut some sort of a deal. We don't know the parameters of that deal, but she testified at the preliminary hearing on behalf of the prosecution, admitting to being involved in the murder of both Jilian, Kelley, and Veronica Butler, the mom of Tifany Adams' grandchildren. So the other person who has agreed to testify for the government is Paul Grice. So those two have cut a deal with the government. Three of the defendants are still ready to plea. I don't know if somebody else is going to flip or the government's going to flip somebody else, but we'll wait and see.
So Paul Grice and Cora are the two who have flipped. Why do you think those two flipped?
Well, I think that Cora, she claimed at the preliminary hearing, I think a lot of it had to do with her daughter, who's basically the one who told the police about this plot. Her daughter was upset about the fact that Jilian Kelley, who was just a court supervised person who was there to supervise the visitation of Veronica, Butler of her children, and Tifany Adams, there was a handoff, and she's there to supervise and make sure things go appropriately and calmly. She was murdered. And I think that the fact that her daughter was going to be a witness, the fact that her daughter had to leave the home, she left the home after these murders to get away from Cora. Cole Twombly is not the daughter's father. So she left, the relationship is between mother and daughter, the real relationship. So I think that kind of persuaded her to come clean. And then, as terms of Paul Grice, he's a strange character. He seems to, and when he testified, acted as if he'd had a crisis of conscience. But a lot of his testimony at the preliminary hearing detailing every aspect of how he had murdered Veronica Butler and how he may have murdered Jilian Kelley. He wasn't sure she was dead already when he stabbed her 3 times in the neck. So she may have already been murdered. So, but he seems to say that he was duped by Tifany Adams, that she and Tad told him things that weren't true. He should have asked for more evidence of what she was saying about the fact that that the grandchildren had been sexually abused by a relative of Veronica Butler's. There was no evidence shown to him. He said that Tifany Adams claimed she had a video, never shown to him. So there was a bit of, I'm going to take the whole fall for this. And then again, the most obvious reason of all, he was facing the death penalty.
The details from when you were in court are so just gruesome. And also, I think it's interesting. No cameras aren't allowed in court. I was outside, but just how small the courthouse is. I was in the courtroom for one of the hearings with you. It's kind of just an awkward situation in there because it's so tight.
You know what? I have rarely, except for like with a gang murder or something, that you're in a courtroom with that many defendants or a white collar crime, but then everybody severs off and they have different trials. And ultimately, we're going to have separate trials for all of these defendants. But the thing that is amazing to me was that they had five defendants, they had high security They're very worried about someone taking out these defendants and shooting them. That so much so that one of us, I think it was me, that walked toward the window, and the sheriff said, "You're not allowed to look out the window," because I wanted to see they had snipers on the roofs. There were snipers on the roof. There, you were outside. There were police
Mm.
everywhere. There's the 8 or 9 sheriffs in the actual courtroom. And the prosecutor, I guess, is carrying a gun too. Like, I mean, I saw it underneath his blazer, one of the prosecutors. So, I mean, it's a dangerous situation. But then you have these 5 people and then all of their lawyers squeezed into this small courtroom. And then you have the families. And frankly, more so than other cases, like kind of in the big cities that we've covered, the courtroom's filled with family mostly. There's some media there and more in the beginning, and there will be more at the trial. But mostly it's family of the victims, and some family of the defendants.
The prosecutor carrying a gun. I don't think I've ever heard of that. Have you ever heard of that before?
No, but I saw him out in the hallway, and I saw he didn't have his jacket on yet, and he was carrying it in a holster on his hip. And given the people he's dealing with and the incredible violence that happened here, and I think the community's outrage at the time, I don't know if, in the times I've been back, that hasn't seemed to dim at all. I think they're just ashamed that somebody from their community would do something so heinous. Um, to me, this case, it just seems like a case where, and this is what Paul Grice said, the defendant, he's the youngest defendant and he's married and he has his own young kids. It's just awful that he did something like this by his own admission. But he talked a lot about how he had been duped, as I was saying before, and that Tifany Adams had told him that these children were being horrifically abused. And it was a use of sexual abuse and the fear that children are being hurt to get people to murder a young mother. And
Mm.
this court-appointed woman who was completely innocent of, even in the scheme of Tifany Adams' crazy brain, like, and I don't mean crazy legally for anybody that's watching, but in her twisted logic, this woman, she actually said, well, she was a court-appointed person and she's allowed this abuse to the children to happen, so she has to go. But frankly, she told the whole gang of 5, she told them that this was the plan. And when Cora Twombly was asked by the prosecutor, did you feel right about killing, Jilian, Kelley? And she's like, no, but it was the plan.
Do we know if those sexual abuse allegations are true?
No, but I have to wonder, here's the problem, because Tifany Adams and Tad Cullum are, big deals in their small town, and Tifany was associated with a lot of organizations in she was in the Republican Party. They're going to church, like they're well established in the town. Everybody went to school together. Every person we talked to knew the defendants, and we cut a pretty wide swath through that town. But it seems so. My feeling is that if she was in court and the grandmother says that Tifany Adams has a son who's in drug rehab, she has a daughter-in-law who's from a different state, who doesn't live, in Guyman and doesn't live anywhere near the murder. She lives in Kansas with these 2 kids. There was some report that her brother was inappropriate. And I kind of think the court would likely side with Tifany Adams. I don't think Veronica Butler had much standing. Like, I mean, she seems like she's 27, a young mother, alone. She's not married. And the grandmother says and there's tiny bit of evidence that the brother had done something untoward. In terms of what actually happened, it's not really strong because the judge was about to return custody to the mother. And that's, things were about to change. There's supposed to be a court date. She was killed right before her court date.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking with a jury, once you start bringing in a grandma trying to protect a grandkid, I mean, that could be sort of persuasive if there's any truth. Again, we don't know if it's true, but
Well, we know enough that it affected custody.
yeah.
There must have been some validity there, or the judge, I mean, I have to assume that the judge heard something that was persuasive, but he still allowed the mother, visitation with somebody supervising. And then apparently, at least according to her lawyer, who we've interviewed and you've interviewed, the lawyer for Veronica Butler's in the custody dispute said it was about to be turned around. And there are indications from Tifany Adams to her gang of killers that she was concerned that the custody arrangement was going to change and that the children were going to be returned to Veronica. And she was worried about that.
Based on all the evidence that's come out so far, it does seem pretty clear that Grandma Tiffany is the mastermind.
They've all said she was the mastermind. I
Yeah.
mean, I haven't heard from her boyfriend, from Tad Cullum, but we did, or Cole, but we've heard from the two witnesses that have testified for the government. Cora said that this was, Tiffany's idea, that she met with her. She told her how this was all going to work. Everybody got assigned roles in the murder. They tried one attempt going to Veronica's home. That didn't work. So they regrouped. And Tifany was the one that decided to add Cole Twombly like about 24 hours before, or a week before, but Paul Grice only found out the night before that Cole Twombly was going to be involved as a lookout. And Cora was somewhat of a lookout. She was also the one in charge of getting the cell phones and basically destroying evidence and making sure that it never came back. And but the murders were done by either Tad and Paul Grice, depending on what Tad's going to say, or just Paul Grice. So, and the way they happen,
Yeah, it's
I don't
bad.
know if anybody's going to think that's okay for protecting two kids when it's questionable whether or not how extensive that sexual abuse was, if it really happened, or if Tifany had been lying to the court the whole time.
And I showed the video of the schoolhouse next to the Twombly's where I was, where some of these God's Misfits meetings were. Um, do you think the God's Misfits component has anything to do with the murders, or because it just almost seems in a way like a sort of a side item, and one way that Grandma Tiffany had them all kind of under her control, but I don't think it has anything to do with the motive. Do you?
No, I think it was a chance for them to meet and keep discussing this. I mean, keep discussing the sexual abuse. It seemed to be a topic. This is according to Paul Grice and also with Cora. I mean, she said this to her own daughter, like what these children are being abused and they're being raped. They're being sodomized, is what Paul Grice said. That's what he was told by Tifany Adams, that the girl had been sodomized and was bleeding. I mean, he was pretty specific. So I think it was a chance for them to meet every Sunday and every Wednesday. They did some worshiping. I think that they read verses. I mean, they were worshiping, but in that context, it sounded like a lot of socializing. The same people. It's kind of what we always talk about when we say people are in their own echo chamber. I think they
Mm.
created an echo chamber, like for them all to discuss this, and it went from we're horrified to what are we going to do?
Do you think more of them could flip?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think that with Paul Grice going through what they use, the fact is, and I just want to, and we got to update the viewers. I mean, your viewers that there's so much evidence. There's the cell phones. There's clothing tossed in to the burial site. There is Jamie Beasley testifying at the preliminary hearing. Poor Jamie, may he rest in peace. He actually was the guy that where they used his land. Tad Cullum sort of, he claimed, had tricked him into, and it sounded it sounds true, but had tricked him into using his land, and that's where they buried Veronica and Jilian. And it's just like, it's horrific. But they testified that, you know, so the bodies were found there. They found the clothing. They found the cell phones, the refrigerator. It can be traced back to a member of the family. They got all their parts together, all the parts for the murder. What happened to the cell phones? Cora testified that she took the phones and her clothing and put it in an incinerator. So we have them destroying evidence and testifying to how they got the evidence. Some evidence is here. Clothing was in there with the ladies at the burial site. I mean, there's so much evidence. And there's DNA on things on the phones that were tossed in with the victim. So yeah, I guess I would guess that it's Cole next. But Cole was also Mr. Sovereign Citizen and didn't, and we haven't really heard from him. I'm wondering if he's going to continue on not believing that the state of Oklahoma has no governance over him or the federal government has. It's not a federal case, so I don't know how that works in his mind. But there is a lot of disrespect and anger at the federal government that also, I think, brought them together in their little
Mm.
cabal. So yeah, but I think somebody else would flip. I think somebody's lawyer would recommend they flip. I don't know. So we'll see what happens. I don't see Tiffany flipping because like what's she gonna get? There's too many people saying she did it.
Yeah. Um, it's you bring up Jamie Beasley, so I showed the video before I had you come on about when we went out to the spot where the bodies were discovered, and Jamie Beasley's actually the landowner out there and let us come out there. And I remember we met him in the night, and I mean it's pitch black out there in the middle of nowhere. And he met us, and he had he had like a big Great Dane dog and these horses that were all free, and the whole thing was kind of like in a way right out of a horror movie, but he was also super really nice and welcoming,
Very kind and very
very kind.
welcoming and very concerned about, worrying that that the police would think, that he had something to do with this. And the police had already determined that he didn't.
Yeah,
But he was concerned and he was concerned. I think he was in a bit of shock because he was on the property when the police raided it. And he was there and they came in with guns a-blazing. So I don't know, he still had a little bit of PTSD from that. So he let us do our thing. But we were very careful in a small town in Oklahoma and in the panhandle not to be trespassing. We did get permission
yeah,
to come onto his land and things were
yeah.
worked out, even if it was dark and there were animals around every bend.
We didn't want to get shot,
So,
basically.
exactly.
But he died since we've seen him of just, I think it was at a heart attack or something like that, I think, right?
He wasn't well. He was he was
Yeah,
great, and yeah, but he was a young man, so
yeah.
it's very sad. But he
It was
was
sad. He was a
person
nice guy.
with
We
a
met his
conscience.
son out there. Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Allison. So the next big piece is next month, right? In November, or sorry, it'll be not next month, but November. That's
I
the
don't.
next prelim.
Yes, that's not a prelim. That's going to be an arraignment. So the
Okay.
arraignment is just going to be where they plead guilty or not guilty. And then we don't have a trial until June of 2026. That's the first trial date. It was supposed to be in May, but I think Cora Twombly's attorney wasn't available then because she's getting married. So they moved it a month, and that's where we stand right now. So there still could be a lot that happens. I have to tell you, when I went to the preliminary hearing, I was not expecting to see Paul Grice get on the stand and talk about how Veronica Butler got loose in the trailer and went running away. And he raced after her with a knife and he wasn't sure what to do. And he tackled her and then he jumped on her. And then Cora Twombly even testified that she saw his arm going up and down. She couldn't tell if he was stabbing her, but Paul Grice testified that he was stabbing her. And then the light went out of her eyes, he testified. And then while he was sitting there, he got off her body and he just sat there because of what he had just done. The enormity of what he just done had hit him. This is his testimony. And Tifany Adams ran around in a circle around him laughing, which elicited a gasp from the courtroom when he said that. The thing about Paul Grice is his tale about Jilian Kelley. She was apparently in the van. Veronica Butler was dead and she was in the van too already. They had placed her in the van. Tad had helped him carry Veronica to the van. He wasn't sure how Jilian had gotten in there. And he said, well, the van was rolling and he was bumping all along and his blood pressure was like just going and he thought he saw her eyelids flutter. And he's like, maybe she's not dead. And I'm gonna actually read you what he said. I saw that she had urinated in her pants. I couldn't tell if she was alive. I didn't know. I had a panic attack about her waking up in a freezer with another dead body on top of her. That's how they buried them. And I said I had to make a decision. I had a choice to make, and I made one in a horrible moment. And basically, I checked her pulse, couldn't tell. And then he testified that she may have been dead already because Tad Cullum was supposed to snap her neck. But Tiffany claimed, Paul Grice said again, and all of this is coming from the two people that testified, what I'm telling you. So then they have a lot yet to lose if they are telling about them doing horrific things. Tiffany apparently claimed that Tad couldn't get a good angle on Jilian, and she believes that it was Paul probably who killed her. He stabbed her 3 times in the neck. It was just so horrific. And
Ugh.
listening to him, I know. And There was a lot of crying towards the end of Paul Grice's testimony when he talked about how he'd been duped and he should have checked and demanded evidence. That Tad said he had a 26-page, they had a 26-page document that showed the sexual abuse in a safe at his mother's house. Never saw the document, never asked to see the document. So, I mean,
It's
I don't know
awful.
if I
Yeah.
believe, I don't know if I believe either one of them about what they said. I guess that's what I'm saying. Um,
Yeah.
I'm sure
Well,
that horrible things happened and that they were both involved in the murder, but as to the extent of their involvement, Cora's version of events has her mostly just watching things happen, which still means that she's a conspirator in murder, co-conspirator in a murder of two women. But maybe it made her feel better to not talk about what she actually had done, if she did
yeah,
it.
I was just reading through some of those details. It is great. And like these hearings, there's like unexpected things that come up. That's I guess what's so interesting about like last time you were like, I can't believe what came out. You know what I mean? So
Was
well
so horrible. It was
yeah.
so horrible. I couldn't believe that he was just talking about it. And the father, Veronica's father's there, the husband, the families are there of Jilian Kelley. Not her children, but I mean members of her family. And I'm like, how can they stand it? How can they bear
Mm,
it? Because whatever they said, it was gonna be something horrific. These people died in fear and were brutally murdered. And then Tifany Adams, her final remarks to Cora, this is what Cora talked about when Cora drove her home, was her nothing had gone according to plan. And there was so much blood. And they spent a lot of time trying to clean up all the blood. And it just was like, frankly, I thought they killed Veronica was murdered like an animal. I mean, it was,
mm,
and so was Jilian. And these were like two like regular people who just were there for so. And Jilian was doing like a service. She's
mm.
just there to help, and Veronica was there to see her kids. And this is what they did to her. So it's just there's not going to be any good ending. But the shock of those two discussing things was a lot, and the reaction from the people there, it was a bad moment. The judge actually had to intercede and tell everybody that if they couldn't, because the father started crying and yelling, Veronica's father, and he said, if you can't control yourself, you're free to step outside for a minute, get yourself back under control and come back in. Because overall, the judge is trying to make sure that the state of Oklahoma and the defendants get a fair trial. So I thought he grabbed control of the courtroom and in the way he's supposed to. So
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you, Allison. We
yeah,
will
sorry.
continue to follow it.
It's
No,
a
it's a lot.
bad.
I'm glad we did the update though, just because I think a lot of people have been asking me like kind of, well, whatever happened with that case? It feels like it just kind of stalled. So it's good we now know exactly where everything stands.
Let me ask you one thing. What was your take about when you talked to Grandma Tiffany when you were outside when she was coming into the courtroom?
Ooh, she's a rough woman. She reminds me of like someone from I think I should told you the show Ozark. Like she is not someone I would want to mess with. You know what I mean? And I could see how she would be very I don't know, convincing to the other people and just, intimidating. But yeah, I didn't get a good vibe, I'll tell you that. Rough looking lady too.
Yeah,
Just, you know what I mean?
she wasn't very well liked before any of this happened anyway. She's
I
like
can
the
see, yeah.
people that came onto her land and stuff.
Remember she chased the plumber away with a rifle, and I mean there were some crazy stories we heard about Grandma Tiffany.
This is I know, and we should say everyone we met there, besides these horrible people who we didn't meet, but we heard speak, they were so nice, and I think they were ashamed and felt terrible about what had happened, and were pretty open to talking to us once everybody was behind bars.
Yeah,
Initially, everybody was pretty scared, as
totally. I think that's what changed after the arrest. It was like night and day with getting people to open up. Um, all
yeah.
right, well we'll stay on it, Allison.
All
I'll
right, have
talk
a
to you
good trip for
later.
your next location.